Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Fishing with James. This is episode 15 of my hand-tied jig series, and today I'm going to be showing you how to make a really cool NASCAR Crappie Jig. So let's get started. So the first thing I gotta do is figure out how to paint the head. This car has a really vibrant flame pattern on it with a black base coat, so I think I know exactly what I'm gonna do for this. The powder paints I'll be using today are black Protec, green chartreuse Protec, and red Protec. And the jig heads I'm gonna use are some 1/8 ounce New Age minnow heads. Now before I show this painting technique, I've got to give a huge shout out to my buddy Justin Robinson over at JustinsJigs on Facebook. He showed me exactly how to paint jigs like this, and he's an absolute wizard with this stuff. So make sure to go give his page a like and check it out. I've left a link to it down in the description below. So to start out, I'm just going to take my torch and heat up the jig head on both sides for just a few seconds to get it nice and hot. Now I'm just going to take my forceps and swish the jig head around in the black powder paint to get a nice coating on it. To make sure the paint sits down nicely and the jig head stays hot, I'm going to take my torch and run over it just to make sure the black paint sticks on, which it has. So now I'm just going to take the jig head and dip it very carefully down into the green chartreuse powder paint, just like this. You just want the very top of it to be coated in the green chartreuse. Now I'm going to go over it with my torch just to get it nice and hot and stick it down just like I did the black. Now I'm going to do the same exact thing with the red, except I want to make sure to leave some of that green chartreuse as an outline around the red, in between the red and the black, just like this. I'm going to heat it up with my torch, and it should look something like this at this point. Now this is where the jig head really comes together. I'm going to take my bodkin, and while the jig head is hot, that is crucial, I'm going to start swirling the paint down the head to create flames just like this. You don't want to dig too deep or you'll break through all the paint. Another thing is you're going to have to reheat this thing constantly. So you can see me with my torch right there reheating the paint to keep it nice and smooth. So there we go again, just another little drag to bring that red down to make a flame. And now here we go to the other side. So I'm going to heat it up again to keep it hot. And I'm going to take my bodkin and carefully drag it down to create a flame pattern like this. You can see how the yellow is kind of outlining the flames a little bit. That's kind of the whole goal of doing the green chartreuse underneath the red. And here we go, heating it up again. It's very crucial it stays hot, otherwise it won't turn out right. Still heating it up. And now we're going to do the bottom. So there's a flame. You can really see that yellow outline there. And another drag just like that. And we're going to do one more right up there. And there we go. So I'm going to heat it up one more time. And there we go. That'll do it. So this is what it should look like up to this point. A nice little flame pattern with a black base coat. So now I'm just going to pop these things into the oven at 350 degrees for 20 minutes to cure the paint. It'll also really help the flames kind of set down a little bit. So it's been 20 minutes. Let's take one of these and tie a jig. So I'm going to start out by laying a thin layer of superglue all the way down the hook. Now I'm just going to take some black 210 denier flat wax nylon thread and wrap it down the hook all the way down even with the point, just like that. And after drying up any excess, I'm going to take my scissors and cut the tag into the thread. Now for the tail, this one's going to be quite complicated. The first feather I'm going to use is a black Marabou feather. I want it to be about the length of the hook, and once I've got it measured, I'm going to take it and hold it down onto the jig and begin tightly wrapping it in. 7 or so wraps should be good. Now, since that is the top color of the tail, I want red and yellow underneath it, so I'm going to be using a red Marabou feather for the next color. Since the red was a little bit thick, I ended up only using half of the Marabou feather, but I'm going to line it up here with the black and begin wrapping it in very tightly, just like I did with the black feather. Again, 6 or 7 wraps, maybe a little bit more will be good. And once it's lined up, I'm going to take my thread and begin wrapping it very tightly all the way up to the head of the jig. And after that, I'm going to take my scissors and cut the tag into the feathers off and put a few more wraps of thread on just to make sure they stay on good. And now I'm just going to take my thread and wrap it all the way back down, even with the other feathers like this. So for the yellow accent and the flame that I'm building in the tail, I'm using the very end of a radiation Marabou feather. So I'm just going to wrap it in and make sure it stays even. And again, very, very tight wraps so it doesn't slide around. Just like this. And so that's what it looks like right now, roughly. And after some fine adjustments, I'm just going to take my thread and wrap it back up to the head of the jig again to tie in the radiation feather. And then I'm just going to cut the rest of the feather off with my scissors. And then put some wraps of thread over the radiation feather, again, just to make sure it's tied in all the way. Now for the flash, I'm going to be using some black crystal flash. So I'm going to take a full strand of it and cut it in half, and then cut that half strand in half again and double it. And after putting it on the jig head at the very front, I'm going to take some thread and wrap over it, and then rotate it 90 degrees to make sure it stays perfectly even on both sides of the jig. Then I'm going to wrap thread all the way back up to the head of the jig again. For trimming, I'm just going to cut it right past the end of the tail. Now for the body, I'm going to be using some black New Age chenille. So I'm just going to take a strand of it and then wrap it in at the head of the jig and wrap my thread all the way down even with where I've wrapped everything else, about even with the point of the hook. I usually turn the vise sideways, that way I can see it, and then I'm going to wrap my thread all the way back up to the head. Now for my favorite part, I'm going to use the rotary function on my vise to wrap the chenille into the jig. This is a little bit smaller chenille, so it takes a few more wraps, but you want to make sure it stays even and wrap it all the way up to the head of the jig. Now I'm just going to begin taking my thread and wrapping it over and under the chenille, keeping my thread as close to the head as I can. This is just to tie in the chenille. And then after I've finished my wraps, I'm just going to take my scissors and cut the tag end of the chenille off. And now I'm just going to do a double whip finish with my whip finishing tool. I'm going to do a few wraps for the first time, and then do a handful of wraps for the second time, and pull that tight as well. Now I'm just going to take my scissors and cut the tag end of the thread off, and there you go, a Jeff Gordon NASCAR inspired crappie jig. Now let's wet this down and see how close we were. So there we go, I'd say I got pretty close. If you guys want to see more videos like this in the future, make sure to leave a comment down below, and if you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe to this channel. And with that, I will see you all next time in the next episode of Hand Tied Jigs.